Hello again and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video we will be explaining firms. So what are firms? I would always like you to remember this image that you can see. So I have land, labor, capital. I call all of these inputs, or I can call them factors of production, or in other words, they are known to be resources. So when I combine all of the resources or factors of production together, they pass through a process of production. And who decides how and what and for whom to use these resources? It would be the entrepreneurs. They are the ones that organize these resources and they determine how much do they need to produce. So here, this arrow, I would say we would have the process of production in order to get the final good or service at the end, which I can call it output. So the definition of a firm is it combines land, labor, capital, which are the inputs, in order to make the final good and service. How can I classify firms? So economists will distinguish between different firms according to either industrial sector, so is it a primary, secondary, or tertiary sector, or whether they are privately or state-owned, they are owned by the government, or according to the scale of production. Let's start off by classifying the firms in terms of industrial sectors. We will be explaining what primary, secondary, and tertiary sector mean. So when I am talking about an industrial sector or the industry, which is a group of firms specializing in similar goods and services or using similar production processes, first I have the primary sector. The primary sector, it means extraction and production of natural resources, as you can see in that image. Then I have the secondary sector, which means it is the manufacturing or the construction. So usually at secondary sector, it is what happens in factories. So manufacturing, it means turning unprocessed natural resources and other unfinished products into goods, into other goods. Then I have the tertiary sector, which means it's personal and business services. So I'm talking about intangible. They are providing services. So for example, when I am talking about the educational sector or I'm talking about the banking sector, these are providing us with services and not goods. And there's one thing I would like you to know, but you're not responsible for. It's called the quaternary sector, which is the fourth type, which means I am subsectioning the tertiary sector. It covers the services industry, but it only requires what is knowledge-based. So this is an image about primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. So as you can see here, we are having the extraction of natural resources. So farmers grow sugarcane in Brazil. However, in stage 2, it means the sugarcane is refined to make ethanol. So here they are manufacturing or constructing. And finally, in the tertiary stage, what they do is they sell the ethanol that they already produced in the secondary sector before. Now we would like to classify firms in terms of whether they are private or a public sector. I would just like to give you a quick reminder. When I am talking about private sectors, it means I am talking about firms that are individually owned, and usually they care about maximizing their profit. And here we will be talking about different types of firms, such as being sole trader, a partner, or limited companies. And we will explain it in a bit. And then when I talk about the public sector, it means I am talking about firms that are owned by the government, and they aim at providing us with public and merit goods. They are not profit-oriented. Okay, and usually when I am talking about public sector firms, I consider them, they are natural monopolies. So the government is the only one in the country that owns the electric sector, the electricity sector, that owns the water or the natural resources such as oil. You do not find them owned by private individuals, because otherwise they would be super expensive, since I aim at maximizing my profit. So when I am talking about privately owned businesses, as we said, my major aim is to make the maximum profit. And I have different types of forms, which is a sole trader. It means I'm talking about one owner, so sole trader or sole proprietorship. You have one owner for the business. Partnership, on the other hand, is when I want to expand my business a bit more, you would find a minimum of 2 owners and maximum of 20 owners. And then I have joint stock companies, which are of 2 different types. Either they could be private limited companies or public limited companies. And then I have a cooperative, and finally I have a charity which aims at helping others. So usually it relies on donations. And then I have the state-owned enterprises that are operated by the government. And any profit that they make, they will reinvest it in improving the goods and services, since their aim is not to make any profits. If losses occur, on the other hand, it will have to be funded by how? By taxing the people. So they will be adding taxes in case they need money. Now, I would like to highlight this common error. Candidates sometimes state that a public limited company is in the public sector. No, I'm not calling it a public corporation. I am adding the word limited company. So a public limited company is called public limited company because the public, which means the people here, it's referring to the people and not to the government. The people living in a country can buy shares in such a company. But the company itself, it operates in a private sector. So still, its aim is to maximize profits. It has nothing to do with the government. Privately owned firms, when I want to explain them, I need to highlight 2 key terms whenever I'm talking about private firms. I have something called limited liability, and I would like you to think of it as considering it limited losses. So the liability of shareholders in a company is only limited to the amount that they invest. So there is no risk of losing their personal belonging when they start up a business. The maximum amount of losses that they would be losing here at that point, it would be the money they invested in starting up that particular business. However, when I am talking about unlimited liability, you will consider it as I'm talking about unlimited losses. So I will not only lose the money I invested in the business, I might be losing my personal belongings in order to cover up for the debt that I have. So for example, I started off with a business as sole trader. I needed a loan from the bank, and the bank approved of my loan. Once I started that business, I did not make any profit. The business is losing. So the bank would not forgive me and tell me, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. You lost, so you know what, you don't need to pay me back. No way. I would have to pay back the bank with interest. So in other words, in order, and my business is losing, it's not making any money. In order to cover for my losses in the bank, I might end up selling my own personal belongings, such as my car, my house, any asset, so anything that I own. So here, I would like to specifically explain what a sole trader is. The characteristics of being a sole trader is that we are talking about one owner only, I'm sorry. He is the only one that owns the business, and at the same time, he is responsible for all the debt. So in case of losses, I would be the one covering up for my loss, which we call it unlimited liability. And again, I might lack capital. So in case I need more money, I cannot ask from a partner. The only thing that I can do is go to the bank and ask them for a loan. And usually banks, because they are profit oriented, they do not trust sole traders because they are at a very high risk of losing. In case they lose, it is a hassle for the bank since they have unlimited liability. However, the good things about being a sole trader is, one of the advantages is I am my own boss. I do not need to ask permission from anyone, and I can choose my own hours of work. So it's either the morning shift or the night shift. And I am the only one receiving all the profits. I do not need to share it with anyone. However, in case of losses and I did not make a profit, it becomes a disadvantage. And this type of business, since it is considered to be the oldest and the most popular form of a business, it is so easy to set up. The disadvantages are, in case I was sick, there is no one to cover up for me since I'm the only owner. And as we said, in case of losses, I would have unlimited liability in order to cover up the debts, the loans that I have to pay. And I have full responsibility of the business. So in other words, if the business loses, it's my own responsibility. I'm the one that made this decision. And may lack capital. We explained it already in part of the characteristics of a sole trader. The second type of private sector businesses would be partnership. And what does a partnership mean? It is a legal agreement between two or more people. More people, it is a maximum of 20 to finance and run a business. It is popular among professionals such as lawyers, accountants, and right now we will be talking about its characteristics. So I would like you to have a look at it. So 2 or more partners, which is maximum 20. The partners are the ones owning the company. But again, I tell you, it is not necessarily a 50-50 business if it's 2 partners. So it depends on the legal agreement between us. It might be 70-30. It depends on what we have the contract between us. And partners are the ones that make all the decisions, and this might cause some of the disadvantages because partners might disagree with each other. However, this is a good thing because sometimes the more the merrier. In other words, the more the people that own the business or run a business, the more ideas we have. And again, same as sole traders, it might lack capital. Again, it is a risky form for banks to approve for a loan. Okay, so please have a look at the advantages and disadvantages. Again, here, what I want to say is that some partners have limited liability and others have unlimited liability. Because when I'm talking about partnership, I want you to remember 2 different kinds of partners. It's either the general partner, which means he is the one making up all the decisions. So he is the one that has unlimited liability because he's the one held responsible to all the decisions that he does. And on the other hand, I would have something called a silent or a sleeping partner. This guy here, he only cares about taking part of the profits, but he has nothing to do with decision making. Therefore, I say he is the one that has limited liability. Then the third type of businesses would be joint stock company, or I can call them limited companies, and they are of 2 different types: private limited companies or public limited companies. They are still under the private sector, so they are still privately owned. What I mean by that is they are allowed to sell shares. So here I will be talking about shareholders. So what are the characteristics of having a joint stock company? These companies, they sell shares in their ownership to raise capital, to raise money. And shareholders, no matter how much they are, and they can reach up to thousands of owners, they are the ones that are the owners. And shareholders, imagine 1,000 owners are the decision makers. It doesn't make sense. It would be chaotic. So what they do is the shareholders with the most amount of shares that they own, usually they are the ones that affect the voting of who the board of directors will be. So they vote for the board of directors, and the board of directors, it consists of a few owners, and usually they are the ones with the most amount of shares, and they are the decision makers. So these firms are also known as corporations or limited companies because the shareholders have limited liability. The maximum amount of money they would lose is the money that they invested, which is the amount of money they paid in order to buy the share and become a shareholder. Okay? Now, why do I call it a corporation? Because when I'm talking about corporations, I'm talking about separate legal identity. So they consider the firm as an entity, and they consider the owner himself as an entity. So in case the firm loses, here the firm loses, the shareholder would have nothing to do with that. So he would not have to sell his personal belongings to cover up the debt. Khalas, the maximum amount of money he would lose is the money he invested. All right? So they consider them separate, the owner and the firm. So I will start off by explaining what are private limited companies. When I'm talking about private limited companies, I'm talking about one or more shareholders, and as we said, they could reach up to 1,000. All of the shareholders are considered to be the owners, and they receive the profits according to how many shares they bought, and they have limited liability, and shareholders cannot be sued since it's considered to be a corporation, which means a separate legal identity. So if the company loses, they sue the company and not the shareholders. And shares are sold privately. They cannot sell the shares on the stock market. So how do they get more shareholders? It is a word of mouth. So people talk in the company, the company is starting to sell shares. Whoever's interested, he will start buying off the shares. And may be required to publish annual accounts. So they might be asked to put all the information about the company out to the public. So how much loss, profit, and so on are they making? So private information. And the board of directors are that we voted for as shareholders. They are the ones that run the company. So these are the advantages and disadvantages. I would like you to have a look at it. Right now, I will be explaining public limited companies. And as we said before, do not think I'm talking about the government. So it doesn't mean it is owned by the government. Public, it means publicly the shares could be sold and bought. So anyone in the world could be buying our shares because what we do is shares can be sold publicly on the stock market. They can announce their shares. However, in the private limited company that we explained before, they cannot do that. We said it relies on a word of mouth. So again, here it's very similar to private limited company, but the only difference is the stock market thingy. So these ones are allowed to sell their shares publicly. However, private limited companies, no. So as you can see, it is the same as before. Everything is the same, except for publish annual accounts. Before we said they might be required to do that. Here they have to publish their annual accounts online and be accessible to everyone. Because people from Japan could be buying shares from an American company or from an Emirati company or whatever it is. And also they hold AGMs, which is annual general meetings to discuss what to be done. And who runs the company? It is the people they voted for, the shareholders they voted for, which I call the board of directors. So please have a look at the advantages and disadvantages. And right now, this is like a quick summary of control and ownership in a public limited company. So we have shareholders. They may attend the annual general meetings in order to vote for the board of directors who make all the important decisions in the company. So they are the ones in control. And then they appoint managers for day-to-day business decisions. Okay? And these managers, definitely, they will be getting a salary. So what are the risk, ownership, and limited liability summary? Please have a look at it. When I'm talking about business organizations, we have different types. Sole trader partnership, private and limited companies together, I can call them joint stock companies or limited companies because they have limited liability. Okay, so please have a look at this summary that summarizes everything. Now, the other type would be cooperatives. What is a cooperative? It is owned by its members for mutual benefit, and there is a one member, one vote policy. We have two types of cooperatives. It's the worker and the retail cooperative. I'll start off by explaining what a worker cooperative is. Workers themselves, they are the shareholders. They are the ones owning the share, and it is managed by them. And also they have limited liability, so the maximum amount of money they would lose is the amount of money they paid in order to become a shareholder. And the workers themselves, they share any kind of profit that they would be making. Here again, retail cooperative, so it's about selling. It is very similar to the worker cooperative. However, the thing is, it's owned by its members in order to buy the products in bulk, so they would make it cheaper for them. So when they are a group of people buying in bulk, they would get a special discount. So this is what I mean by a mutual benefit. Then I have the fifth type of private sector businesses. It is the charity. Charity, it is not owned, okay? Because usually I don't aim at making profit out of it. So it's not owned, therefore I do not aim to make a profit. What does it do? It provides services for public benefit. So they aim at helping others, okay? Who runs it? People that they trust. Therefore, I call it board of trustees. And how do they get the money in order to help the less fortunate people in a country? They receive and they rely on gifts and donations from people and other organizations. Right now, I would like to explain what I mean by a state-owned enterprise, and here I'm talking about literally public sector or government-owned organizations. And I can denote it by SOE. So this happens through nationalization, so it is when the government buys private sector businesses. So who owns these state-owned enterprises? What are some examples of it? I mean, they're owned by the government, and some examples would be the railway, the postal service, the power company, oil companies, and they have public policy objectives, which means they deliver electricity and sanitation. They provide public and merit goods, and they need to run by the central bank to discuss what are their revenues and what are the costs of starting such a project. And governments at the same time, they would be the ones providing subsidies to the state-owned enterprises, since they aim at taking care of all the people living in the country. So they are concerned about the public, the interest of the public, which means the people. So this is a revision checklist. Make sure you know all of these. Now I will be explaining how can I classify firms in terms of size. Is it a small firm or a large firm? So the size of firms, it is useful to group firms together according to whether they are large enterprises or small and medium-sized enterprises. The size of the firm can be measured in different ways. Okay, right now we will be discussing how can you measure, how can you tell if this is a small or a large firm. And they provide useful clues about the reasons why some firms grow into very large organizations while others prefer remaining small. So these are some examples about large and small or medium-sized enterprises. How can I measure the size of the firm? I have 4 different measures. The first one is according to the size of the workforce. So how many workers do they have? So, but I need to keep in mind that some large firms are capital intensive and they might not require to employ a lot of people. But usually, if it is less than 50 workers, then I consider the firm to be a small firm. Okay? The second measure is internal organization. So larger firms are divided up into different departments, each specializing in a particular function. So you have the management department, the recruiting department, the accounting department, the finance department, okay, purchasing and sales department. So in smaller firms, the owners and the employees, all of them, they tend to carry out these functions. So they don't have a lot of departments. The third measure would be what is the amount of capital that we employ. So this is the amount of money invested in productive assets that generate revenue. The more capital a firm invests in productive assets, the more goods and services it can produce. But production by some large firms, again, this might be, they are labor intensive, so they rely more on human workers rather than on machinery. The fourth measure is called market share. And when I am talking about market share, it's large firms may dominate sales in the markets they supply, but not all markets are large. Firms serving small or niche markets will tend to remain small, and now we will see the reasons why is this happening. So why some small firms remain small in size. I would like you to keep in mind, when you are asked to measure the size of the firm, you cannot measure it in 4 different ways. So it's either the question tells you and what measure they are using, or you will choose any measure of your own. Because remember, these two contradict each other somehow, whether if the firm is capital or labor intensive. So here there is an example, which firm is the largest. So if I want to look at the amount of workforce that they have or the number of employees, this is the first measure, let's say, I would be choosing Toyota Motors because it has the largest number of employees. However, if I am to look at the number of machines or capital employed, then it would be ExxonMobil. If I was to look at the amount of output that they are producing, then it would be, again, ExxonMobil. If I want to look at the market share, which means the percentage of revenue that they are generating, it would be Google. So try this application, explain the different ways in which the relative size of a firm can be measured. So please test your knowledge, see if you are capable of writing down the 4 different measures and explaining them. Now please have a look at this quick recap. Okay, this is what we explained. And now, what are the factors that influence the size of the firm? So what makes it a small firm? What makes it a large firm? It is because of the following factors. So the first one would be the age of the firm, how old it is, does it have good customer base, does it have enough capital, what type of business organization is it, does it have economies or diseconomies of scale? And when I am saying economies of scale, it means it is a situation where larger output can be produced at a lower unit cost. We will explain it later in more details. And finally, it is according to the size of the market. So right now we will be discussing small firms and why some small firms would want to remain small. What are the advantages and disadvantages of remaining small? So why do they remain small? We have 4 different reasons. The first one is it may be because the market is already small, or as we said before, we call it a niche market. So they're already specialized in a local area, so it doesn't make sense for them to grow in size and pay more money and expand the business. The second reason would be unable to raise enough capital in order to expand. The bank is not giving them a loan, so they cannot expand. They don't have enough money in order to make their business bigger. The third reason is new technology may have reduced the scale of production needed in some sectors. So the demand on their product is not that high, therefore no need for them to expand their business. So therefore they would be remaining small in size. And finally, I can call that personal choice. So the owner may prefer keeping the business small. These are some other reasons. So you are free to choose whatever you want. Just make sure you are capable of understanding and explaining 4 reasons why some small firms remain small in size. Okay, so we have contracting out is just a new term that I would like you to know. It is the transfer of responsibility for the provision of a product from one firm to another. Okay, so that particular firm has nothing to do with it anymore. They hire another firm to do the provision of the product. What are the advantages and disadvantages of small firms? The first advantage is small firms can usually be set up super easily. So in other words, it doesn't require a lot of paperwork. They just need a few legal requirements in order to start up the business. So it's easy. And as we said, usually small firms are sole traders. Okay. Also, it can be run from home. You don't need big premises in order to run that small business. It's not big. So you can work remotely. Also, because it's small, the government would help them out against big competition. So they are the ones that would be receiving grants, or I call it subsidies, from the government. The second advantage would be paid managers rather than business owners often run large firms. It's very large. And these owners, they can afford hiring people to do their day-to-day task and managing the company. So the owners of small firms, they tend to run the business all by themselves. So they run the day-to-day tasks. They are the main decision makers in the company. Okay, and they prefer it to remain that way. The second, now we will be starting with the disadvantages of small firms. So because owners of small firms usually have full responsibility for running the day-to-day tasks, so this is related to this. So I can say this is the advantage. However, they need to keep accounts. They need to be capable of advertising. They need to be capable of recruiting and managing all this stuff. So in other words, guys, what's happening is they need to have a big responsibility of job description. They need to be capable of having the necessary skills to run this firm successfully. Okay, they will also, one of the disadvantages, since I'm the only one running the business, I will have to work for long hours. Also, they may have to close their firms and lose revenue. So this was one of the disadvantages of being a sole trader. If I get sick and I close, there would be no one to cover up my place. Let's continue. These, again, are the continuation of the advantages, and these are the disadvantages. So the third advantage of running a small firm would be their owners. Small firms may be able to react to changes in economic and market conditions because they don't have a lot of machinery that they would need to change. They're already small in size, so they can adapt more quickly than larger firms. Let's continue now with the disadvantages. This is the second disadvantage. They may lack financial resources, which means money, because banks usually don't trust small firms as much as they trust large firms, because they believe they are at a very high risk of not being capable of paying back. The third disadvantage of being small, okay, we already explained it. The fourth one is the average cost of delivering a service is much more expensive than larger firms. Why? Because usually they do not have economies, no economies of scale. They are not massively producing in order to decrease their cost of production. Therefore, the per unit cost of production is much more expensive than larger firms. Therefore, you find when you buy products from small firms, Therefore, you would find it sometimes super expensive. It's more expensive than larger firms because they cannot afford selling it at a lower price. Okay, so this is a big summary. Please have a look at it, pause the video, and read it in the form of a table. And this is the recap of what we just did regarding small firms. So this is like the summary. Again, pause the video and have a look at it. Now, in order to test your knowledge and be capable of understanding this objective, I need you to try and explain two advantages and two disadvantages of being small in size. Now, what happens is, I want to start something new. Let's say this small firm decided they want to expand, they don't want to remain small in size. So what they can do is they can merge with other firms. So right now what we will be doing, we will be discussing mergers and the causes and forms of the growth of firms, why firms would want to grow in size. So the growth of firms can come about through two different ways. Either they will grow internally or externally. So when I'm talking about growth, it could be either internal growth, and we will explain in a moment, or external growth. External growth, it means I'm talking about merging with someone else, or they take over another company, or they acquire another company, which I call acquisition. So firms may wish to grow in size for a number of different reasons. They may be able to reduce the costs of production by benefiting from something called economies of scale. So their cost of production is decreasing because they are massively producing, mass output. The second reason might be they may be able to gain a larger share of the market, so their market share is increasing. Market share. They may be able to develop new and improved products because they have the money, they have the capital, so they can do something called the research and development. And this research and development is for the product that they are manufacturing, how they can make it better. They may be able to sell to new markets since they're big. And probably when I'm talking about new markets, I'm talking about exporting their own goods to other countries. And because they're large, definitely they are much stronger than smaller firms. And they have higher chances of remaining in the market and not losing. And when they are increasing their market share and when they are decreasing their cost of production, they will be achieving the major aim of all businesses, which is to maximize profits. Okay? So how firms grow? As we said, they have two different ways, and this is what I will be explaining now. I want you to take notes of it. It's either internal, or another term for it, I can call it organic growth. And it is when a firm expands its scale of production through the purchase of additional equipment and increasing the size of its premises. But I need you to keep in mind, this would, when they are doing that, this would increase their fixed cost, which might be rent. So the firm is growing internally only. So for instance, when AIS decided to open another campus, this was considered internal or organic growth. All right, they got a new premises, they started producing more, they opened IB, the American system. It's not only IG or the British system. Okay, another way of the firm to grow in size, I can call it external growth, which is integration. So when I'm talking about external growth, it is when two or more firms join together to form a larger enterprise. Okay, and as we said, this would be known as integration. It involves, what is integration? It could be, as we said before, either merging of two different firms, or one firm takes over the other firm, which is the acquisition. Okay, so external growth can come in different ways. It could be through merging, it could be through taking over, or it could be through, the last thing is acquisition. Okay, one thing I need you to know regarding internal growth, it comes in different ways. It is, I would either reinvest some of my profits back in the firm in order to expand my business, or I would ask the shareholders to put more money, more capital in the business itself, or probably I would be operating a franchise, which is arrangement where the firm allows another business to use its business idea. So when you have more than one franchise of that particular business, it's under the same name, under the same set of skills and qualifications. However, it might be run by someone else. So I might be opening more stores in malls, and I have my name in, okay? So this is how I can talk about how firms grow in size in two different ways, internally or externally. This is one example. Make sure that you are able to distinguish clearly between internal and external growth. And I care a lot about giving examples. Okay? This is a recap, and try to apply that, please. So this is like a summary of what we just explained. Which of the following is an example of internal growth? Is it acquisition? No, because acquisition, we said it is an external growth. Is it when they franchise? Yes. Merging and takeover? No, these are external growth. So when they want to grow through either merging or takeover, so specifically I am talking about external growth, how can they achieve that? And they can achieve that in three different ways. Either I call it horizontal integration, and horizontal integration, guys, it happens between firms that are producing the same good or service, and they are in the same stage of production. So if I take a look at these two companies, both of them, if they want to merge with each other, both of them, as you can see, are producing chemicals, right? So they are producing the same type of good and service, and both of them are in the secondary stage of production, which is manufacturing. As you can see, they are creating pollution. Then I have another type of integration. I can call it lateral integration. Or another term for it is the conglomerate merger. As you can see here, these firms are of absolutely different industries, but they are in the same stage, or they could be in different stages of production. So as you can see, they are absolutely producing different goods. This one is producing furniture, this one is producing chocolate, and this one is producing paint. Now, why would they integrate? Obviously, this company here probably would have the best advertisement system. So they have a lot of customers. These, they know how to decrease their costs of production. So each one of them is specialized in a certain area. If they merge together, they will grow, and they will be capable of producing in larger amounts, and therefore increasing their profits. The last type of integration is vertical integration, and as you can see, it has different stages of production. So for example, as you can see here, I'm talking about my final good that I am producing is the cheese. But the cheese, when they are selling it in the shop, this is the tertiary stage of production. When they are manufacturing this cheese in the factory, this is the secondary stage of production. When they are milking the cow, this is the primary stage of production. So as you can see, what happens is the cheese shop or the deli store, he integrates with the with mara'i, and mara'i is integrating with the farm. So all of them are integrating with each other in order to decrease their stages of production. Now, if the cheese shop is the one that decided to do the integration with the primary sector, I would call that backward integration. If this guy here, the primary stage of production, they are the ones that decide to integrate with the cheese shop, I would call that forward vertical integration. So again, we have 4 different types of integration. One, horizontal, forward and backward integration. They are known as vertical integration. And finally, we have the conglomerate, or I can call it lateral integration. Okay, so right now we will be talking about a new section, which is economies and diseconomies of scale. However, I would like to start by explaining what are economies of scale, and it means I'm talking about decreasing the cost of production. However, diseconomies of scale, it means we are increasing the cost of production. But right now, I will start only by explaining what are economies of scale. Economies of scale could be of 2 different types. Either they could be internal or they can be external. When I'm talking about internal economies of scale, there are cost advantages, which means they are decreasing their cost of production that a particular firm only is the one gaining from its own increase in output. However, when I am to talk about external economies of scale, again, it is the decrease in cost of production or the cost advantages that all firms in an industry gain. So it is affecting the industry as a whole. Okay? What are economies of scale? So again, I need to explain that graphically. Here, when I have the cost per unit, and here I have the number of units produced, which is the total output. To me, as a firm, from my point of view, I would like to achieve the lowest cost possible. And at that point, it would be this one, the minimum average cost. So the minimum average cost, let's say it was per unit of production, it was $15, and they were producing 20 output. So that point here is what all firms would try to achieve. This means this is the cost saving from increasing the scale of production. Now you might be wondering, they are increasing their cost, how they are increasing their output, how come their average cost starts to increase again? Because later on, it means that workers probably start wasting time, they start getting bored, the work is becoming redundant. So you reach a point where you should be satisfied with the amount that you are producing. And it's definitely much cheaper than only producing 1 unit. Okay, so to produce 20 as a whole, it means it is a lower cost per lower average cost, so it is per unit of production. All right? So internal economies of scale, as we said, I'm talking about cost saving from the firm's point of view, and here I'm talking about the industry, cost saving for the industry as a whole. Let's see the different types of economies of scale that we can reach. First of all, we have marketing economies. Marketing, you need to relate it directly to the term advertising. So they are not only advertising for one product or in one particular area, they are doing something called mass advertising. Okay, they have their own advertising network, their own distribution network. Sorry. So this is how they could be saving their costs. Another one, it's managerial economies. The term managerial, it's from managing. So here, large firms are capable of employing specialist staff, and this will reduce their cost, okay? Because everyone is specialized in his own specific skills. So here again, I want you to remember what we explained previously, the advantages of being specialized labor. Then I have labor economies. Labor economies, I can also relate it to specialization, because here they would be putting departments, they are dividing labor. Okay, so here I have division of labor among their other staff. The fourth type of internal economies would be financial. The term financial, what does it relate to? Money. So because they're large, they are capable of borrowing more. Their chances of borrowing are better than smaller firms, and they could get better interest rates. Then I have the technical economies. And technical, it's from technology, so I would be relating it to machines, and large firms are capable to afford and employ advanced machinery or equipment. Then I have the research and development economies. Since it is a large firm, they can assign one department that their only thing to do is to research about that product. How can they develop it and make it better? How can they decrease its price? How can they do some innovation on that particular product and increase their sales? And then finally, I have the risk-bearing economies, which is the risk spreading. So large firms can spread their risks in various ways, including product diversification. So they are not only producing one type of product, they will be diversifying their products, doing different products. In case one product is not selling properly with them, they have other things to cover up for this loss of a product. Okay, so let's say a company would not only be specialized in the production of jackets, it would be producing jackets, jeans, pants, shirts, dress shirts, dresses, and so on. In case one is not working out, they can afford to sell other things. Or probably it's not only selling clothes, it's also selling perfumes, it's selling chocolates. So they will minimize their risks of losing because they have a diversification of products. Now I want to talk about the external economies of scale, which is affecting the industry as a whole. What are the different types of external economies? I have the transport. So when I am talking about transport, you guys, I need you to think about the improved transport links, such as a new airport will improve transport links for all firms in an area, cutting down the distribution costs, so how they are going to move the products from one place to another. Then another type would be education. So when I am talking about education, I am talking about improved educational facilities such as colleges, such as providing courses that are relevant to the local economy and that will benefit the area as a whole. There is a new course that would help the workers. And they're not talking about workers only in that specific firm. It's workers that have that specific skill. They can take that course and they will improve the industry as a whole. Then I will be talking about suppliers. When I am talking about suppliers, I'm talking about ancillary firms will become established to provide the necessary components to all firms in that particular area. And the fourth one would be amenities. What do I mean by amenities? It's improved housing and social amenities will encourage workers to move to that particular area. It's becoming more advanced, more social for the people. So people wouldn't mind moving to that particular area, workers moving to that particular area and working there. So it improved the whole industry, the group of firms in general. And the final one would be associated services, which is, for example, the development of appropriate banking and insurance services that will benefit all firms. Okay? So please have a look at these notes. So I wrote some notes for you here, so you can pause the video and take a look at that slide. Now, when I want to talk about diseconomies of scale, I want you to remember that this is a situation where the more I produce, the higher my unit cost. So there is an increased cost of production. Again, here I would be thinking about it in two different ways. I have internal diseconomies of scale, and I have external diseconomies of scale. Let me give you a quick brief. What do we mean by internal diseconomies of scale? So what is the cost disadvantages, so the increase in cost that a particular firm experiences from its own increase in output. However, when I am talking about external diseconomies, I'm talking about the increase in cost or the cost disadvantages that all firms in the industry are experiencing. So let's have a quick look at that. How can the firm itself face the increasing cost of production? So the different types of internal diseconomies of scale. The first one is management problems. So sometimes if a firm grows too large, management of the firm may become less effective. Then I have something called the technical problems. Again, this is related to machines. So a large firm may also experience technical problems as it buys new capital and equipment. And the third one, failure to sell the output. So they produced all of this output, but they have no access to it, distribution access to it. No one is buying it. So if a firm is producing more than it can sell, the proportion of advertising cost may become too high, and thus this would increase the average cost of production. The fourth one is industrial relation disputes. So, such as, for example, when I am talking about strikes. And strikes are more likely to occur in larger firms. In strikes, we explained it in the previous video, which was trade unions. Now, the external diseconomies of scale, what are the different types? The first type would be the cost of labor and other factors. So I would like you to think of here, it is possible that as an industry grows, the cost of labor could increase. So cost of labor increases as the supply of skilled and specialized labor is becoming less. Also, the cost of land may also increase as the demand exceeds supply, and this would increase the rent. The second one would be congestion. There will be an increase in transport, which would increase congestion, traffic, leading to higher transport costs as journey time is increased. So for example, it usually takes me from Abu Dhabi to Dubai an hour and a half, but because of the congestion that we are facing and the traffic, it would be taking more time. It might take me 3 hours. So this would be an extra cost. And then I have the pollution. There may be more pollution, both in terms of noise pollution and even air pollution. Finally, so this is not affecting only me, it's affecting all the firms in that particular industry. Then I have more expensive housing, which means the cost of housing may increase, putting workers off relocating to an area where it is much cheaper. Now, firms want to grow. They were small and they want to grow in size. But the question is, are they capable of growing too large? Can they become super large firms? I would like you to think of firms can experience problems if they expand their scale of production too quickly. And thus, this would lead to something called diseconomies of scale. And now we will be explaining the different types of diseconomies of scale, which is management diseconomies. The firm becomes too large to have control over all the firms that they have. They would be facing communication problems. There might be disagreements between managers in different departments. And a large firm may suffer from internal communication and coordination problems, especially if it has different or many locations and many managers and different points of views and activities. Then I have something called, when I'm talking about diseconomies of scale in general, we have labeled diseconomies, which is when the firm may become too large and it cannot afford to keep up with the wages to attract the proper skilled work and specific number of workers that they need. So at that point, what might happen are the industrial disputes that we explained, which is strike, for instance, or overtime ban, or work to rule, or go slow. Then I have the supply constraints, which means if a large firm may run out of supplies or parts or material, so they cannot keep up with the production. They might find skill shortages. It is a large firm, remember, so they need to attract a lot of workers. So one of the problems they might face, they are not capable of attracting enough skilled labor. Then we have finally, the last one is the regulatory risk. Remember, smaller firms cannot compete with the large firms. So as a result, governments, what they do, as we discussed earlier, one of the advantages of small firms is that they will help and give a grant or a subsidy to the small firm and not to the big one. So at that point, governments will introduce laws and regulations that control the prices of big firms. They don't allow them to sell at a high price, and they start producing. At that point, when the firms are not capable of increasing their prices, what would they do? They would start producing low quality products in order to decrease their cost of production, and therefore they will be increasing their profits. So guys, this is a quick recap. Remember, we explained internal and external economies of scale, and we explained what it means. Remember, it's always about the decrease in cost of production. However, when I am talking about the diseconomies of scale, whether it was internal or external, this means my cost of production has become more. Okay, try to apply this. Try to see if you were able to give different examples among internal or external economies of scale. Thank you guys, that would be it for today. I hope you liked the video. Have a lovely day.